Starfield now has local maps. Proper local maps, not that horrible dot thing. And I can already hear people saying, yeah, that's a pretty low bar, but let's take the positives where we can. This is actually a big improvement. It is strange, actually, but all of a sudden, just being able to see the terrain rather than that horrible blank set of dots does make me slightly more curious about exploring. I find myself a little bit more interested in going places than I did before. So this is a positive development. And this will be especially useful around cities like Atlantis City, Aquila, etc. And I will admit, I am much more likely now to think about exploring a little because I can see a feature, it might grab my interest and I'll set off to explore and probably get distracted almost immediately, which is part of the fun of a BGS game. But there is a downside to these local maps. This is Ocean. Yeah, it sort of exposes the procedural generation a little here, doesn't it? I'm not saying this is not possible, but yeah, that's a little, it's a little square. But don't get me wrong, this is a positive development. I actually quite like the level of detail on the maps. Another great feature that's been added in this update is the ability to decorate your ships manually, the same way as you decorate the outposts. And yes, that includes that ship, that special ship that you cannot customize. This isn't just going to make it a little easier to make your ships feel a little more unique and, you know, add those little personal touches. You will also be able to have a lot more function in smaller ships. You won't need a special hab just to get the weapon workbench, for example. Now, the patch notes for this update also state that this also lets you play around with your ship's layout with more openings available for doorways. And I'm sort of assuming that means you can now plan your ship better and put doorways where you want. I'm not sure if you do that from inside the ship or with the ship builder. I'm going to have to play around with it a little more, but that is definitely going to be a welcome change if I can do that. But this will absolutely be one of those little changes that gets me back playing my NG Plus playthrough a little more to see what crazy ships I can now create. There are now lots of difficulty tweaks that could be interesting, although the most interesting one for me is sustenance. This will basically mean that food and drink grant positive effects and negative effects if you don't eat and drink. It's kind of a survival mechanic, although it's not a hardcore survival mechanic. It's more of a roleplay aid for people who like to have a good excuse to go and eat and drink. This is definitely one for me. I just sort of wish that they also had something that required sleep. Now, there's actually been a lot of updates since I last played the game, including things like DLSS and frame generation being included, so you no longer need mods, and this is letting me easily get 120 frames per second, so that is a welcome change. I do understand that changes like this, and indeed changes like the map, are going to get people basically being a bit negative and saying that a lot of this should have been there from the start. And you know what? They're pretty much correct. In fact, they're definitely correct. This is one of those things that's more of a better late than ever kind of scenario. It is a positive thing, though. It's better that they added this than they just didn't. But I'm pretty much damning with faint praise right there. Now, the update notes also state that there are some major features on the horizon, including a land vehicle for speedier planetary exploration, official mod support for Starfield, and the massive Shattered Space expansion. And honestly, I think it's probably going to take the latter two to get me back into playing Starfield properly. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like the recent changes, and I may even load the game up and goof off once they add land vehicles. That does sound a lot of fun. Same way as I'm going to play around with the shipbuilding pretty much as soon as I finish making this video, but a full playthrough? Honestly, that's going to take something more. In fact, I think the expansion is only going to get me back to continue on my NG Plus playthrough. To start again from scratch, I think that's going to require full mod support for reasons that would probably require a whole video just for that subject alone. So these are definitely good changes, and they've piqued my interest in the game once again, and I'm definitely now looking forward to full mod support and this expansion. More than anything, it's good to know that Bethesda are paying attention to the feedback, and hopefully they will keep this up, not just with future Starfield updates, but, you know, with the mind for future titles. I mean, I kind of doubt that they would not have had a map for the Elder Scrolls 6, really. But, you know, if for some odd reason they thought that was a good idea, at least we now know that they know that it would have been a terrible idea. Hopefully. Bethesda, if you didn't realize that was a terrible idea, that is a terrible idea. We need maps for Elder Scrolls 6. Yes, we do. And preferably a lot less load screens.